Today we're going to talk about Justice Breyer announcing his retirement and the backlash from the right to Biden's decision to nominate a black woman to take his place. And I interview Congressman Ruben Gallego from Arizona, who's widely viewed as Kyrsten Sinema's primary challenger in 2024, about her decision to protect the filibuster over voting rights and whether he'll run against her in the primary. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're listening to No Lie. Okay, some good news, or at least some news that isn't bad news. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer has announced that he'll be retiring at the end of this term, ending more than a year of the will he, won't he speculation, and also allowing our collective blood pressure to go down for a fleeting moment. Now, I do want to put this into perspective here. Biden naming Breyer's replacement won't do anything to change the ideological makeup of the court. It'll stay a 6-3 court. But what it will do is prevent the court from shifting to 7-2 if a Republican president took office and then something were to happen to Breyer, who also happens to be the oldest justice on the bench. Like 6-3 is not good, but it's a hell of a lot better than what would be a cataclysmic shift at 7-2. Now, Biden's promised to nominate a black woman to the court, standing by this promise from his campaign.
I committed that if I'm elected president and have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue.
And yet, even despite promising this on the campaign trail, still the right is having a collective fainting spell at such glaring reverse racism at play here. Like, 200 years of plucking Snow White justices out of country clubs is totally fine, but Biden intends to nominate, doesn't even nominate, just intends to nominate one black woman, and suddenly we're concerned about fair practices when it comes to race. Like, come on now. Jonathan Turley, the lawyer who Republicans called to testify during Trump's impeachment trial, claiming that Trump offering up military assistance to Ukraine in exchange for the favor of dirt on Joe Biden somehow wasn't a quid pro quo. He took to Twitter to write, quote, "Biden is now going to create one of the more jarring and incongruous moments in the history of the Supreme Court. When the justices will hear arguments on the use of race in admissions, one member will have been selected initially through an exclusionary criteria of race and sex." In other words, he's arguing against the unprecedented use of certain criteria to select a Supreme Court justice, unprecedented except when Donald Trump did the exact same thing in 2020. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, Trump vowed to nominate a woman to fill the seat. In fact, this practice goes all the way back to Reagan, who in 1980 pledged to nominate a woman to the Supreme Court. I wonder why these Republicans were okay with this precedent for the last 40 years, but not this time. Weird, huh? Now, Josh Hawley took to Twitter. He wrote, "Moment of truth for Joe Biden. Will this deeply unpopular and divisive president finally reject the radical elements of his party and nominate someone who loves America and believes in the Constitution, or will he continue to tear apart this country with a woke activist?" Like, Hawley's worried about activists. Brett Kavanaugh literally called the opposition against him revenge on behalf of the Clintons. Amy Coney Barrett signed an anti-abortion advertisement in 2006 that said, "It's time to put an end to the barbaric legacy of Roe v. Wade." And please don't get me started on the richness of Josh Hawley, who held his fist up in solidarity with the insurrectionists, lecturing anyone about belief in the Constitution. And finally, of course, what would be testing the waters of blatant racism without the grand wizard himself, Tucker Carlson?
"I will appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court." That was Biden's promise. All right. But which black woman exactly? Biden didn't tell us. Biden didn't mention the Supreme Court nominee's legal qualifications or judicial philosophy or ability to perform one of the most important jobs in the country. He didn't even tell us she was a nice person. All he said was she's going to be black and she's going to be female, because to him, that's all that mattered. You almost got the impression that Joe Biden believes all black women are the same. They're identical. It was certainly the assumption in the Delaware of Joe Biden's youth 60 years ago. Biden doesn't seem to have changed much. You wonder if anyone sitting there in CNN's audience that night even noticed this. It's possible we've all marinated for so long in the casual racism of affirmative action that it seems normal now to reduce human beings to their race. But imagine if this was happening to you, how would you feel? You go to law school, you win a clerkship, you get a seat on some lower court. One day you're nominated to be one of the top 9 judges in the country, and you're proud of that. Why wouldn't you be? Your parents are proud. Your friends are proud. But Joe Biden? All Joe Biden can talk about is your skin color. Patronizing? That doesn't even begin to describe what this is. This is exactly why decent Americans hated segregation. It dehumanized people. Now, Biden claims that his race counting is essential so that the court and the rest of his administration, quote, looks like America. Of all the lies that Joe Biden tells, this could be the easiest to check. We have the latest census numbers, and we can promise you with dead certainty that Joe Biden's nominees look nothing like America, not even close.
Right. The takeaway from Biden nominating the first black woman to the Supreme Court is that Biden thinks all black women are the same. Yeah, that totally checks out. The verbal gymnastics that this guy will go through in service of some pretty overt racism shouldn't surprise me at this point, but it does. It's funny, too, how Tucker's immediate beef here is with affirmative action regarding a court where there are literally 0 black women, where there has never been a single black woman. Imagine trying to die on the affirmative action hill here. Like, nothing says that these white people are just getting crushed by affirmative action quite like pointing to the Supreme Court that has literally never had a black woman on it. If we really want to talk about qualifications here, since that's Tucker's front, he just wants to make these choices based on the merits, that's all, nothing whatsoever to do with race, then fine. Let's look at the very last nominee to the court. Amy Coney Barrett never tried a case to verdict or argued an appeal in court. She had all of 2 years' experience practicing law when she was confirmed to the Supreme Court. So maybe, if you're a Republican who hailed Amy Coney Barrett's nomination, you think twice before denigrating a nominee that Biden hasn't even named yet, just because you can't stomach a black woman sitting on the court. A black woman, by the way, who we all know is going to have sterling qualifications, sterling credentials. Because let's face it, if you're black in the United States, you need to be that much better than everyone else. Obama went to Columbia, then Harvard. He was the president of the Harvard Law Review, got married once and had 2 beautiful daughters, and still he wasn't good enough for conservatives, who then turned around and rallied around some con artist with a bunch of bankruptcies and 3 wives. So let's not pretend that there is not a glaring double standard here. I don't know who Biden will nominate, but I can promise you one thing. It won't be a beer-obsessed sexual deviant who lies throughout their confirmation hearing before ultimately crying and lashing out at the Clintons. If that guy was good enough for the right, then I feel pretty damn good about the jurist that's going to get nominated in the coming weeks by Joe Biden. And I should finish with this reminder. If Democrats had not won both Georgia Senate runoffs, Mitch McConnell would have unilaterally blocked Biden's Supreme Court nominee for the next 3 years. So I get that, because of a 50-50 Senate, that Build Back Better is languishing. I get that voting rights are DOA. I get how impossibly difficult that is. But the difference between a 6-3 court and a 7-2 court is monumental. And because those voters in Georgia showed up not just during the general, but in record numbers for a runoff, we saved this seat. And that's a win. I've said it before, but even when it seems like we're failing because there's not enough forward progress, sometimes just by virtue of being in power, we're able to stave off the worst impulses of the GOP. To listen to my interview with Representative Ruben Gallego, where we talk about Sinema's decision to defend the filibuster over voting rights and whether he'll primary her in 2024, click the thumbnail right here on this screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.